Hi, welcome to this Open Security Summit in January 2022. And we're going to talk about a project that is very dear to my heart because I actually wrote most of the code in it, which is the OWASP Security Bot, which is something that I kind of been actually almost been developing for the last probably maybe 10, 15 years, because I did a lot of stuff for the O2 platform, which some of you guys might know, which basically I use the same principles when I developed this. A completely different stack of the platform was C#. This is a lot of it is Python, but the concepts were always, were very, very similar. So let me just first give you a very high level view of what it is, right? And then I want to, this session, because there's a couple that I've done, I want to go a bit down to the code because I want to show you some of the code examples, right? And how the parts of it. But the key concept, right, of this code or this is actually a kind of saying that is actually allows you to make fact-based security decisions. So the point here is allows you to connect the dots. So the whole idea is that you need a workflow where every time you have a challenge, you're able to ask yourself a question in kind of the Worldly Maps model. Can I automate this? What can I get from the technology that I exist today? And of course, the more that technology, the workflows are a commodity, the more you should use it. Absolutely. The problem happens when you hit, in a way, a roadblock, when you hit this situation where, the technology doesn't give you what you want. And sometimes it's very frustrating because there are simple things, but you just can't get the data, you can't get this, you can't connect, you can't automate. And then you end up spending your life in spreadsheets, and you spend a lot of your life in this world where you make little progress. So you might feel that you're going there, but you're highly inefficient. So if you go back to the 7 habits of highly successful people, we should spend a lot of our time sharpening the saw. If you don't spend a chunk of your time automating and creating tools and improving the tools that you have, right? Of course, again, leveraging the best that exists, then you're not very efficient in your overall scheme of things. And 6 months down the line, you're still dealing with the same problems. So in a way, this toolkit, it's kind of a framework, right? That's why I kind of call it the bet, but fundamentally it's a framework. It's the idea, right? And what can it do for you? Well, it allows you to make sense of reality, right? So you can look at this graph here, and you might say, wow, this is very complex. I actually look at this and going, wow, this is a massive simplification of reality, right? So what you're seeing here is Jira tickets mapped, by, in a graph-like format using the OS, the OS bot as the engine to create this. And what happens is you can already see that you can spot lots of patterns. You can spot lots of interesting epicenters, right? You can spot a lot of things, and it's only when you can manipulate this data that it becomes reality. So fundamentally, the OS bot is a collection of APIs that have evolved over time to make it very efficient to codify what you want to do. And also very important that you should always be ready to get rid of what you just wrote if something is better, right? So it's very important to be very Darwinian. So one of the, basically, the reason it's called OS bot, right, or OWASP Security Bot, is because one of the ways to consume it is to a Slack bot. It's not the only one, but it's a very practical one. And every time this has been implemented, it's been highly efficient. And in fact, it's still working on the Open Security Summit channel. If you can go there, you can say hello to the bot. There's a couple of things that are still working, right? And the point here is that you create a bunch of commands for it, which then allows you to do all sorts of rendering. I'll go in more details on how this works. And then you even have Jupyter Notebooks support. Right? So basically, these bots allows you to graph your world. So my view of this is that when you look at security, have all these activities, all these data sources, etc. You want to be in a position where you are codifying your world. You're codifying what you actually want to do, right? So in this particular example, we have the CLI where you can actually see that, for example, we manage in Jira, right? We're creating graphs to this. We're finding all sorts of ways to visualize the different graphs. So I did a session on Monday where I went into more detail about the different types of graphs, different types of schema that you can see. So check that one out. And but also, you can manipulate stuff. So the cool thing of this is that, if you look at all these APIs, they evolve based on real world challenges. And it's an interactive process, which I think is very important. So in this case, the other thing that's super powerful is to be able to REPL, which is actually read, evaluate, print loop, which is a very fancy way to say feedback loops, like your world. So what you have here is a world where you can come to Jira, you can do a command, you acknowledge, you see the results, and you do this over and over again. And this is, if you take one message from this presentation, is create feedback loops. And this could be your CI pipeline, this could be, how you develop, all sorts of stuff. But it's super important that you create feedback loops between you doing something, a developer doing something, you making a change, and you're actually seeing the end result. And it's still very uncommon to see good feedback loops throughout the system because you need good pipelines, you need good automation. In fact, you need to spend time in your test environment, the test infrastructure, in tools like this one, right? Because that makes a massive difference. So here's the thread model that we created, which it was one of the few times where I really saw thread model scaling, where we had a Jupyter notebook, which is the one you can see here on the left. And notice it's a big screenshot, again, taken using the OWASP bot. There's a cool feature using Chromium to do this, right? And then we actually mapped, almost thread modeling as codes, and we did all sorts of visualizations. And this is actually the modules, how they relate to each other. And these are the questions we were asking the thread modeling, that were the answers, the risks, etc. And that allowed me to read this in a very effective way and really understand what's going on. And also I had a good opportunity to also start to do some dips, understand the differences between one version and the other. So that was really cool. So this is just an example here that we mapped of actually creating a set of graphs. So you can see that in this particular example, we have CSV with data, and this was actually on G Suite and slides. And this is actually an interesting concept, right? The point of data is that you want to be in a position where you don't argue what it is. You just basically ask the question, how can I access it, right? The way I look at this is I don't care what it is. As long as somebody can touch it, I can go, I can get it, I can manipulate it. Once you have access to it, then you start to create these workflows where you send data to a way to be consumed. So in this particular case, we have raw data that we want to input. And one of the examples I had was really cool it was actually the design, right, of an application. It was actually for example, an application data flow where we actually were importing that into a system, right, into actually Jira, which is super powerful. But in this case, with a CSV that contained all sorts of data inputs that we wanted, we got that. I use a Jupyter notebook to actually help me to do what I'm seeing here on the right, which is this interactive way to manipulate it, to see it. But then usually this becomes a function is available by Lambda function. So it becomes a bit of thing that gets called by Lambda function, etc. And the power here is that we put the results into Elasticsearch, right? And so every time we made a change in Jira, in this case, we went to Elasticsearch, which then we can explore it. And then you get the feedback loop, right? So this loop is super powerful. Right, and I highly recommend that you use something like Elasticsearch or other kind of hash-based databases, right, to hold some of the visualization data that you want to do. But again, Elasticsearch is not a good place to store graph data. It's a good place to send graph data, but it's not a good place to be the data store. I like Jira or other types of, or even sometimes JSON files in repos. They're great because they really give you solidity of the data. To visualize, send it to Elastic. Way better, right? So basically what you're doing is you're doing data science of this, right? So you're mapping the data, you connect the dots, and you understand, like, for example, who does what, the roles, the people, etc. Right? So you can see that we have a hyperlink organization, right? And then here's some cool features, right? So this is a good example. In fact, we can do this today, right? If you go to the OWASP bot in Slack and you say screenshot of this, you get a nice screenshot, right? So basically you just do this command, browse the screenshots. And what I want to explain to you is how this works, right? Because it's actually super powerful. So I'm actually walk you through this because I think it's quite a cool workflow that I want, basically it's really the whole idea of this presentation, right? It supercharges your kind of development environment. So let me walk you through this. So let me just get rid of this guy here. Okay, so cool, right? So if you go to GitHub, there's this repo called OWASP SBot, right? So this repo here contains a whole bunch of utilities. Probably the one that you're going to get the most value from is the OWASP bot utils. So there's actually two, actually. I would say the OWASP bot utils and the OWASP bot AWS. So what this is fundamentally a bunch of, you know, functions in Python that make the code much simpler. Now, if this was C#, I would use extension methods, but Python doesn't have that concept. Well, it does, but it becomes a massive hack. So, you know, I took a little bit of a different approach here, but the power of this is that you get to see that I try to make everything simple, right? So the logic is that you know, you take, for example, a list, and if I have a file, I want the first one. I just want to call a method called first. I want to call a method called a not empty. I want to call a method not empty or empty, right? Or I want to have very clean functions. So this is not the best example, but we get a bigger one, for example. So these are methods that make life easy. For example, is the current host online? What's the DNS? Is the port open? Right? Making an HTTP request, making, for example, a GET request, making a delete request, making I get bytes, or maybe I get bytes to a file, or maybe get JSON. So what you can see that a lot of these methods are very simple because they build on each other, right? The point here is that when you're coding, you know, I really don't like these big Python code blocks and all that stuff because, right? So if you look at this, right? If I want to make a GET request, I should just be able to type in code and go, you know, this, right? You know, if all you're doing is doing a test that you want to get request, then you should be able to do that, right? And in fact, if you want the results in JSON, you just go like this, right? And that helps a lot. So a lot of these functions are all designed and to make it, you know, super easy, you know, to code, right? And you can see that I'm solving lots of little problems, like, you know, like again, the GET. You can pass the headers, you can pass some encoding, but if you want the bytes, if you want the bytes to file, you want the JSON, if you want just the options, post JSON, put. So you can see that this is a great way to make the code simpler. So when you read your code, I will see in a second, the code is super clean, right? Like CSV is a good example, right? Like, you know, and a lot of this is, you know, instead of having, even this code here, like, why should I care about how it's loaded? I just want to get a load CSV from a file, right? So you put the logic sometimes into the function name to allow you to be a lot more super efficient. So when I get to use that, I just need to know that I'm going to load CSV from a file or from a string, you know, or from a URL. So this, for example, if you look at these 4 cases here, just this already makes the code way simpler. And this is all about refactoring. It's all about making the code simpler and simpler and simpler. And kind of the OWASP bot came out of that. And it has tons of those, right? So every one of these things is about that. So for example, JSON, there's lots of functions here about loading files, processing files. So it becomes super simple. And then what I tend to do is I actually tend to go back and go create almost sometimes, and this is the interesting thing, right? Like, for example, these 2 methods are duplicated, but it doesn't matter because sometimes you want to say, I'm going to load from a string, or sometimes you're going to say, I'm going to load it. But in fact, this probably came first in that one because, you know, the reality is because I'm loading it from a string, or it might be that it actually supports both. Let me just double check it. No, this actually just loads the data, right? But it's very important that you have methods that make sense in English. My view on this is always like, you should be able to, you know, be a bit groggy, start coding, and whatever you want to call that function should be the name of that function, right? Because also you want to read it in English, you want your code to read in very effective ways. So basically, this is the one that I would say gives you tons of values, right? Again, just a couple more, maybe process, you want to start a process, you know, solve little problems. Again, sometimes you need to you know, change more to, you can start a process, kill the process, start it. And then here, for example, I already solved a lot of the problems of actually how to get the console out, etc. So suddenly I got the bit where I can just go run process or exec process. Actually, you can see that the exec and run process do the same thing because they map to the same function. But I found that sometimes, you know, I call them different things, right? And it's okay, right? It's not a problem, right? You want to make sure that, you know, for example, exec process make a lot of sense. So I'm executing a process, right? And then I want to stop a process. I want to, you know, etc. So, you know, this allows it to do that, right? So the one that I would say that this is one of those utilities, and I cannot code in Python without this because it just makes me super productive. because it makes my code super clean, right? The one that I would say that it probably adds a lot of value if you do AWS is this one here. So this is the one that, basically it's a gigantic wrapper on top of Bottle 3, right? So what I've done here is I went to, basically you can almost see when I was using Bottle 3, right? So you can see that for every of these areas, what this is doing is it's almost saying, reducing what you want to do to one function, right? So for example, in S3, if I want to get a file from S3, I just want to get, I want to call, you can see here, right? Look, bucket create, bucket delete, bucket exists, bucket not exists, right? And this is important because the reason this is important is because when I'm writing my code, if I say, if bucket exists, do something, I can read it, right? If I'm going to say, if bucket exists equals to false, it actually requires you more context to do that. So I prefer to go, if bucket not exists, right? So it's a simple thing, but it makes a massive difference when you code it, right? Go into that supercharging your development button. Look at this, find files, so this allows you to run a query in S3 to find files, and there's some limitations, but again, it's already solved. That thing already returns a nice list, already index it. So what you find is, for example, Bottle 3 returns a huge amount of stuff, and I don't care. I just want a list of files, right? So a good example, file context, right? So this literally, there's the call, you can see there's already another method here to get the object. Then I grab the body, I read it, decode it, and give it to you. Like this already takes away sometimes 10 lines from some code. It's just super simple. But sometimes you want to zip. So this allows you to abstract and going, look, I can almost not care if it's a zip file, because a lot of logs like that, because I grab it like this, right? This downloads the file locally, this deletes. And by the way, some of these are a little bit hard-coded to Linux. So again, send a pull request if you want to make this a bit more wider. But again, file download 2, file copy. So the file copy is almost the one. Because again, sometimes that's what you want to do. You want to move from one thing to the other. And some of these, you can almost see that what I was doing is I was simplifying my code. So this creates a gzip file from a string. So it's a good example of, instead of having a whole palaver of code where you want to do that, you just say, look, when I'm coding this, I know I'm going to have a string with my logs. I call that function, bang, right? I got my thing in there. So this is all these utilities: file delete, file delays, file exists, file move. So here's an example. Like if you want to do a move, you don't have a move, right? So this allows you to fix problems, for example, with frameworks. So Bottle 3 does not have, at least last time I looked, a move function. So here it is. You basically do a copy, you delete it, and then you return if the file exists, right? And some of these, you don't need a huge amount of error checking, because in this case, I can check on the other side. If I get a result false file here, then I can do something about it. But a lot of these things, they work super and super efficient. So that's, in this case, the S3. And then of course, there's a whole bunch of stuff here to help policies, etc. And just another really good one is EC2. So this allows you to, for example, get details about AMIs, which you could see has already been cleaned up here. Here's a way to create an instance where it becomes much more cleaner to create an instance super quick, right? This becomes super powerful when I was actually trying to just get the stuff that I care. So here you can see a good example. Like when I get an instance details, at the moment, a lot of the stuff gets spread in all sorts of different places where I'm going, no, I just want this, and this. So I highly recommend that, even if you don't like this, use the same principle, right? Really try to, simplify, refactor your code to the minimum possible and create all these helper functions that make a massive difference. And in fact, here's an example of basically, I get my instance details, but if you look at what's happening here, I'm actually going to map out the EBS, i.e. the hard disks. And the problem with this is that you actually need to process it and filter it until you actually get the data in a nice formatted way. So this again allows you to, for example, when I send this data to Elastic, indexes super well because it's already nice and clean, right? In terms of what happens here. So EC2 is super powerful. And then when you go, even things like Lambdas, right? This is how I'm very super efficient to create a Lambda. So this is also where I went and figure out exactly what is needed. For example, to create a Lambda, to modify it, to execute it, etc. Where, for example, when I created a Lambda function, I can create a Lambda function in a couple of seconds, right? And I can create it, which basically means that when I'm coding my Lambda functions, I'm insanely efficient, right? Because I don't have feedback loops that take, right, minutes or 10 seconds or 20 seconds or 30 seconds. And that makes a difference because if you, for example, are creating a Lambda function and Lambda function is created in a couple of seconds, you make 5 changes a minute, you make 10 changes a minute versus 2 changes a minute, and that makes a massive difference, right? So, for example, this is one of the super powerful functions that's here because it already has this way where you can create, you can delete, you can map events, you can grab the functions, you can get information about it, you can invoke, right? With already, again, a massaged, set of results. You can invoke asynchronously. It does, you can even get the logs if you wanted to. So basically, what you see in here is a wrapper around every one of these modes. And every one of these is always built on the mode of how can I make it super simple? So this is where I basically make Boto 3 sane, right? So it dramatically simplifies the deployment and development on top of Boto 3. And this makes you instantly productive when you're coding. So if I go back, so I wanted to show the screenshots. So the screenshots is a good example of and this sometimes goes by milestones, right? So if you look at the OS browser, what this is a really powerful API that made it super easy to use Chromium inside either your local desktop or inside what's it called, a Lambda function, right? And it was not trivial to make it fully work nicely, but once it works, it's super powerful. And what it does, it has a bunch of examples where you can basically see that, you can, let me just see if these guys are good examples, where it becomes super, super clean to do this. So here's an example. So this was actually a Lambda function that was actually taking a screenshot of a Slack because I want to capture Slack messages and I want to capture things. So actually you could see that it's a node where you get the target, you get where you're going, right? So here's where I want to go, here's the team I want, here's the width and the height. The scroll by is how up and down you go into the page. So just to reiterate, the challenge here is that how do you take a screenshot, right, of a Slack channel, right, programmatically, right? So, and the way I look at this is that, as long as I can hit Slack channel, as long as it's a browser base, I should be able to automate it. So what you have here, in fact, I even created a method, which will go in a second, a class called web Slack, which should be here. So let's load that in a second, right? And but here's, can you see that it's already been, this is the key point here, right? This web Slack, it's already an abstraction layer of the main browser, has already been reduced almost to the minimum possible commands that you need to do. So you can see, look, web Slack, this logs you in, right, into the default account that you set up. This changes the browser page to that width. This opens, in this case, the target, which is going to be the channel. And again, the fact that how to get to a particular channel is already abstract here. This is how much you want to scroll. This is a little delay because it's not took a little while just to refresh the pages. This could have been better by just figuring out what is the exact event that Slack gives you the browser to communicate. Then you fix the UI for screenshot, which again, I'm going to show that in a second. And this is again is where I would remove things. I would clean the UI to get a very nice clean. This then just gets you a screenshot, which is a PNG data. And then this will then call this function to send the PNG to Slack. So can you see that how, when you read this, it should be very clear what is happening, right? You log in, you change the width, you open the page, you scroll up, you wait, this could have been improved. You fix the UI, i.e. you remove, for example, the sidebar, you do a couple of other things that don't make sense for a screenshot. You actually take the screenshot of the browser, right? Then you call this other function to just In fact, I would probably, I'll actually, this could even just be moved to that guy because that's the sort of default functionality. And then, of course, there's any errors you send it through, right? So let's just take a quick look at this web Slack because I think that's quite a cool thing. So where it is, browser, sites, web Slack. So let's go here, browser, sites. There you go, web Slack. So if you look at this, what you can see here is that, so for example, in this case, you actually figure out which of the, what's it called, where we're resolving from AWS secrets in this particular case. Again, this could have been improved, right? So this is just about setting up so you get the secrets from there, so then you get the URL from there. And then here's the command, right? So this is the login page, right? So this is the code that allows you to log in to Slack, right? So you log in, and in fact, in this case, you actually can see that I'm actually using a little bit of JavaScript. In fact, I'm using jQuery to do that. So again, there's other ways to do this, but why, if this is available, that's a great way. So this basically is going to take the values, email and password from here. It's going to put on using jQuery. So this is basically goes there, sets the value to that email, and then sets the value to password, and then just calls JavaScript eval. Then waits for the page to load. So you get, this is where you can wait for this, and then that's it, right? And then you can log out the same way. The one I was going to just capture is, for example, this is actually simpler. I think the jQuery is bigger, the Jira. But you can see that in this case, I'm going to use command to hide the list of this on the right. So the point is that you make it super simple. You keep refactoring, right? And if I go to Jira, I believe the Jira has a more interesting, yeah, here we go. Right, so Jira in this particular case actually finds a bunch of stuff and then removes some divs, removes some selectors, removes span, etc. Now this code needs to be maintained a bit, but the advantages are spectacular because we actually were able to time go to Jira, remove a lot of stuff that was not needed, and then have a very clear, almost like a screenshot for the Jira ticket, which was great. Right. My point is that you codify this, right? You create these wrappers that make life super, super easy. And fundamentally, almost then going to your original questions, how do you create these environments for developers? How do you create this workflows that is super easy to use? You code your way into it. You keep refactoring. You keep, finding the simplest possible way that you can achieve something. And as long as a browser can do it, as long as there's a way to do it manually, you want to start coding that.
So I mean, this is great, Dennis. I mean, yeah, you and I have been having this conversation for a long while, and you're very familiar with all these graphs. But one of my key questions, if you got a, and I think it was brought up yesterday in the talk, that if you've got, only a very small proportion of programmers are familiar with kind of threat modeling, and then so how do you make this so this becomes easy to use? Because I've got to say, when I look at some of these concentrated screenshots, there's a wealth of information in there, but how do you make it easy for someone to digest and then act on it? What's the action? Because most people aren't going to be able to understand what the output is, let alone how to program it. So it's getting it so it's you kind of hit the lowest hanging fruit first and make it really easy for people to adopt it in their flow.
Yeah, look, I actually think that in some of these, and yes, I think the OWASP Bot, it could do with a lot of love in terms of just make it super easy, right? Or smaller subsets, right? But I think a lot of this it's almost about direction, right? Like you need to be in an environment where the priority is already, to start coding this, right? Because if those questions are not being asked, then it doesn't matter how much you can automate, right? It doesn't matter how much you can do this thing simpler because you're still going to hit that roadblock. So, and I actually think that you need to look at the organization that you're in and saying, hey, how can I allocate resources for development within, for example, the security team or within the development team to automate things? And then what are the technology stack? And what are they already comfortable using? And I would start there.
Yeah, so it's how you federate this approach with the existing tooling, because at the end of the day, developers are fundamentally efficient, or call them lazy. They'll do, they'll
Yes.
put the minimum into their Jira tickets. They'll do the minimum documentation they need to do. They want to code, and it's how you make sure that there is how are they forced or encouraged to use this because it's a value to them. So it's how you So I don't know if you thought about how this sits within. There's one question about what that basic kind of coder and information is, and then how it sits alongside common tool platforms.
Yeah, so I would challenge you is I don't think developers are lazy, right? I think developers need to be given this problem. They need to be given the time. They need to have a mandate to automate their process, right? And the problem is that the gravity and the force for product development, for feature development, for fixing, a particular business unit is massive. So it becomes almost a financial question, right? Who is funding that development? Who is funding those hours that the developers are going to spend, right? Yeah. Automating their processes.
I know lazy is an emotional word, but I guess so, which is why I started with efficient, because
efficient, yeah.
At the end of the day, if people say, "What have you done today?" and you say, "What I haven't produced any new features, but what I've done is made sure that what I've produced is secure." That's great, but then you got to tie that back to the business risk. So you make sure that the risk you're covering is recognized by the business. Otherwise, you have a development team that do something brilliant like this, and then but they haven't cranked out what the customers want. Then you've got it's more of a perception problem with the business, I think.
Yeah. Oh, no, I completely agree with you, right? And I try sometimes to address that problem in two ways. One is to try to make it so that there is business value in those non-functional requirements. And sometimes a good way of doing that is to try to sell or try to expose what you actually build almost as a product to users or customers. And that means that there's revenue streams, for example, in CI pipelines, in testing, etc. Right? And so that's, if you can do that, that works quite well, because it means that there's now business value in that world. And then the second one is to try to provide, basically independent, budgets from security or development for this type of productivity activities. Because if you don't have specific budgets for that, you're going to struggle, right? Because you're going to be fighting that question, which is, here's a bunch of resources, they spent X, what have they achieved? And ironically, we're still in a world where making the teams more productive, helping how you develop, sharpening the saw, is still not high, sometimes on a lot of agendas. Technical debt, sometimes it is, but I feel how you operate needs to be there, right? And then once you have that, it's about finding the tech stack that they're comfortable with and going into this process. Like for me, the OWASP Bot and even the two platforms it's almost something that if you keep approaching the same principle, I'm going to automate this, like I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Eventually you arrive at the framework, right? Like, I could start working with Bottle Free tomorrow and, given enough development time or development team, I would arrive at something like the OWASP Bot, right? Because I would look at every chunk of coding going, well, this is too complex. How can I refactor it? And then how can I refactor it? And how can I refactor it? And then it becomes super clean, right? In fact, until it becomes, I had an example here where, the code, for example, of the actual function, like here, and then the code becomes super clean, right? So if you look at this is a Lambda function that just takes a bunch of parameters to create a Google chart, right? Where it basically takes the chart type, the options, the width, the height, the data they want to show, and if you want to click the image or not, right? And then everything else has been abstracted in this function, right? And this function here, right, fundamentally is taking that and is going to call this create data table, which is basically this function here. And this is basically going to execute. So if you look here, this is a pretty cool workflow, right? So what's happening here, just for everybody, if they can follow, is that you basically are going to call a Lambda function with those parameters. The Lambda function is going to start a local web server, which is going to open up a web page who has a bunch of HTML. right? Which is basically this web page here. So this web page is going to be open inside the Lambda function web server, and then you open up. So it's hosted. Sorry, it's hosted by a local web server, and then you start Chromium and you open that page in there. So basically, so this page will be loaded up in Chromium and is rendered by the local Lambda function. And it means that when it loads up, and you can see here, in fact, you can ignore this stuff because this is just test, simple charts. So this actually creates a vanilla chart, right? But in this case, it creates the chart div, which then I can invoke from here. So you can see here, I'm going to go a new Google visualization, get the chart div, and I'm going to pass the chart type. And then down here, I'm going to pass the data. The data is here. There you go. Array to data table. There you go. So this is the bit where you create the data table from, and in fact, this is a cool thing because it's actually, I believe you actually can convert directly JavaScript, so JSON to JavaScript, so it works really nicely. So basically what happens is you open up the page inside the Chrome, inside Chromium from local web server, and then you add the data to it, and then you take a screenshot, and then you send to Slack. And all of that happens in about 1 or 2 seconds. And the coolest thing of this is that when I'm developing this, I'm super efficient because not only I have a local browser to do this and I can publish it and see in Lambda directly, I can just basically, I'm basically hosting a local web server. So if you look at these examples, you have examples for loading up AM charts, data tables, a calendar, Go.js, Google Charts, Viz.js, Viva Graphs, even Worldly Maps, right? So this is basically one that creates a nice Worldly map from here, right? So you basically, in this particular case, I basically add this thing where you can actually manipulate a Worldly map in here, who then gets taken screenshots and then shown. But the point is that you want to be in a workflow where you can go, here's the problem I have, here's how I codify it, right? And you need, basically a team that is going on that direction. So then when you say, I want a screenshot of X, I want a screenshot of this, it becomes super efficient to do that. So here you go. Here's the real tour of some of the key components of the OWASP Security Bot, right? Actually, here's the example I was saying. Here's an example. In fact, this is an example that didn't go through the cleaning because there's things in here that, so this screenshot, this is actually a screenshot. This is not using the code I just showed you because the code I just showed you didn't have this, didn't have that, didn't have things in here that were not relevant. And it was super clean, right? And allowed us to actually have, in fact, even solve little things as widths and stuff like that. So it becomes super, super efficient on here. So I think I've showed this before. This is the graph projects to outcomes. And I think there's just a couple more little things I want to show. So that's the instance response. Yeah, so now this is just a couple of the commands that you can do with the bot. So when you deploy the bot, and by the way, if anybody's trying to deploy it, please ask, reach out and ask, right? There's a bunch of little gotchas which actually need to get it documented, right? So, but the whole point here is that the bot in Slack has this structure. You run commands, you pass an attribute, and you pass a parameter, right? So that's kind of how it works. So for example, if I go Jira help, I get the help here, right? If I go Jira graph, I get the list of commands they have here. If I then go Jira search, then I can put a type, which can be one of these guys here. So for example, I go Jira search people and then Basil, you get the list of people, right? You get the issues that in this case had, people, and people in this case was hard coded to a particular project, which was, we had project for people. So you can see here, for example, this is how you do the issue. So I can go JSBot, Jira issue, put the key, that gives you the value. So for example, I can go like this, JSBot, Jira issue, GSP 181, right? So this also allowed you to define the things you want to do with this, right? In terms of the Jira. So you can see, for example, you can do a search created between this, created in mats. You can actually, go up and down. This tends to do with this is actually legacy. I don't think this is used anymore. You can use the links to see all the links from an issue, visualize it, and And you can also create tables from Jira data, which is really cool. This version actually had a great ability to create PDFs. So what this will do, this version, in fact, there's a whole, if you're trying to do automations with GS Suite, there's a whole module that, again, dramatically simplifies the ability to create, what's it called, manipulate, Google Docs, right? So let me just find it. It's the G Suite project, and this has a huge amount of helper files, right? To really make it super easy. And that's an example in Lambdas, for example, to create slides, to manipulate sheets, to access files in G Drive, G Sheets, etc. Right? So for example, here, you have a command that if I want to create a sheet, you just call this method, sheet, and then create and share. You can do things like get the metadata, add a sheet, right? Delete it, but also like things like getting data, right? So again, get values. This is insane. Simplifies things because it dramatically, basically this refactor some of the complexities of doing stuff, right? In what's it called? In Google Docs, right? So it becomes super easy for them to get values from a spreadsheet, set values, get values as objects, which is actually super powerful because you actually get a Python object from the actual values, convert raw data to flat objects. So you can see that all of this make life super, super simple, right? And the one that I think is also really cool here is the sheets, to create slides, because this also allows, let me just see if I can find that, GSBot might be this one here, that, yes, has a lot of, no, it's not this one. There's one here that has a huge amount of helper methods. Here you go. Create tables, allocate, and some of the complexities here are to do with the complexity of manipulating G sheets, right? But you can see that you try to make it as simple as possible. So if I want to create an element, right, I should just be able to say, insert the text here, object ID, bang, 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 right? So you make it super simple, so that when you're creating the projects, when you're creating the slides, it might be this guy here, you get much cleaner code, like this, right? Look, create slide with one graph. And you can see, even this is already a mass simplification because you just put the graph that you want to put, right? And this is actually going to put the title, the table ID, and then it's going to delete the slide in case it already existed, create a slide with the slide ID, and then insert the text, in there, and then convert the graph to slide. Even here, right? You go graph to slide. This already contains complexity of knowing how to go and get PNG from the graph, expand it. But this creates, there's some examples that where you see the automatic creation of slides. This is how you do it. And it became super powerful because we were creating slides programmatically from, what's it called? From Jira data, which was pretty awesome, right? At that level. And also in this case, we also have the ability to go, in fact, this was the simplest function ever, but super powerful, is once I add integration to G Sheets, basically there's a method that you could call and saying, give me a PDF. And this will literally give you a PDF in the Slack-bot of a Google document or a Google Slides or a Google Sheet. Especially Google Slides was super powerful. So suddenly in Slack, if you just say, hey, give me the Slack of this presentation, that I actually create it programmatically. So you can see that you automate each of the little bits, which basically means that the end result is we could create programmatically dashboards with data from a data source that have graphs created in a bunch of different places, inserted programmatic into a Google Sheet, sorry, Google Slides. Then you take the PDF and you send that to Slack, right, or somewhere else. And that for me is what you can do with the OWASP Bot, is these kind of workflows, which certainly are not rocket science. They are doable, right? Because they allow you to create all sorts of visualizations, right? Yeah, and I think that's and yeah, and then this is the final bit was just a schema, but I've covered this in the other presentation. And then finally, I just want to do a shout out to Worldly Maps, right? Because again, if you haven't looked at it, get your head around Worldly Maps, because in fact, here's an example of the Worldly Maps created using the bot, right? Cup of tea, dynamic creator. You can even do this, right? You can even, add cup, add this, and then you can see you're programmatically generating a map here, which is pretty cool, right? Or using Jupyter notebooks. So, finally, here's the codes, which I showed you. And then, and there's this is a great presentation by John, by the way. If you haven't seen it, has a whole bunch of stuff. And some of the presentations that I've done that I kind of go into more details into some of these workflows and some of the code examples of what you can do. So that's it. That's what I want to kind of cover today. Any final questions?
No, really. I mean, it's the tools have moved on. Like, I mean, that was for me the only question, which is about. I can see it. This is a really powerful tool in an expert's hands. It's how you make it so that it becomes more widely adopted. Because I know you're. I completely believe in the graph, but it's how you interpret it and it's how you make it so that people understand how what the power of that is. And if all you're looking at is procedural lines of code and looking out for some very basic errors, if you've got this powerful tool, how do you get it so it becomes everyone understands it?
Yeah, I think that what we need, right, and there's a space in the market here, right? We need a simple graph engine that is between spreadsheets, right, and Neptune, Neo4j, even Jira, that is really simple to use. You simply manipulate, it's serverless. You can start to use it straight away. You can start to put your data in this kind of interactive way. And we almost wrap these APIs in that use case where you can build your graph almost organically, or take a spreadsheet and use that as the first base of your graph, right? So I feel that there's a space there, right? I think what I'll try to do for the next summit is do a session on maybe ideas for how to implement this, and saying, hey, if you're trying to build a startup, or like people like Neo4j, people like Elastic, right? People like Jira, right? For me, they still miss a trick, right? Because they have a lot of the foundations. Even people like ServiceNow and others, right? They have the data exists there, but they don't think in graphs, right?
No.
Which is still a gap in the market. So
brilliant. Listen, I've got to drop for my next call at 7, but thank you very much. It's great to see that. All right, cheers, guys.